Friends, welcome to my sewing room. My name is Beth. If you're new, welcome. Today's quilt block, Christmas Lilies, is really pretty, and it takes some 2-inch squares, 2.5-inch squares. I'll leave the amounts below, but there will also be a free pattern available down below. There's a link in the description box. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my half square triangles. Put my 2.5-inch squares together into groups. I'll need a group of red and pink for half square triangles. I will need some red and greens, red and whites, and green and whites. So there'll be 4 different kinds of half square triangles, and there'll be different amounts, but that is what I'll be making for this quilt block. Typically will make my half square triangles using a pencil and a ruler. I'll put right sides together, I draw a line, and then I sew a seam on both sides of my pencil line. I do show a pencil line in my tutorial here, but for the most part, after I get going, and especially when they're smaller squares like this, typically you can eyeball that pencil line. You kind of can imagine it going through the center, and I just sew a seam on both sides of that imaginary pencil line. When my half square triangles were ready, I went over to my ironing board and I pressed them open. For the most part, I'm pressing towards the darker fabric. See, this quilt block takes a lot of half square triangles. Now the quilt block pieces are all 2 inches, and all of my quilt blocks use a lot of these 2-inch elements, and they actually contain 64 squares or half square triangles. So far it's been just squares and half square triangles, so that's a lot of little pieces to sew together. I did want to mention that this pattern is a free download. The last 4 blocks are not free. They're in my Etsy shop. Just a simple pattern with the instructions for each of the blocks. My thought was it would just be cost prohibitive to purchase every single block, and when this is all done, I kind of wanted to package it up into one pattern with all of the different blocks. There'll be a total of 8 sampler blocks, and the 9th block will be sort of an alternate block where you'll need to make quite a few. The sampler blocks, I'm making 2 of each sampler block, except for the last one, I'll be making 1 of those. And then when I get it all together, it will be for purchase for about the same amount of money as that the first 4 blocks that are in my Etsy shop. I hope that makes sense. I just didn't want to have people purchase so many blocks. And when you put things on Etsy, you do have to pay a little bit of money to Etsy to, to list your items there. So that's how it works out. So here I have all my elements ready, and I'm going to lay these pieces out and begin sewing them together. This Christmas lily block is really pretty. In the pattern, I give you the cutting amounts, and down below the cutting amounts for all of the red squares. But in my sample that I'm making right here, I used 2 different reds. One of the red fabrics are 2-inch squares, and the other red fabric I used for the half square triangles. So that makes my block just a little bit more scrappy looking, and I kind of wanted to go for that in this quilt sampler. This is block number 5 of the Tiny Blessings sampler, and these quilt blocks are so pretty. You know I love red and green, and if you're sewing along, I'd love to see your progress, maybe on Instagram or the Facebook group. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.